Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tara and I'm a Catholic revert. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my greatest Catholic role model, Edith Stein, who is the woman who helped bring me back to the Catholic Church. Edith Stein was born in 1891 in the town of Breslau, which was then part of Germany and today is in Poland. And she was born into a devout Jewish family and was the youngest of 11 children. And she was actually born on Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, and this was of great significance to her mother, who was extremely devout. Edith's father died when she was just a couple of years old, and her mother took over his lumber business and actually grew the business to be very successful and was able to provide well for her family. From a very early age, it was evident that Edith was extremely bright and extremely gifted. She had an incredible intellectual curiosity. She read everything she could get her hands on. She was a great writer, and she just had this intense love for learning. Now, as I had mentioned, her family, they were a devout Jewish family, but as time went on, Edith's siblings started to fall away from the faith, even though her mother remained extremely devout. And Edith herself, when she was 15 years old, decided that she no longer believed in God and no longer believed in religion, and she gave up prayer altogether. At the same time, though, Edith was always a seeker and always was looking for truth. What is truth was such an important question in her mind. And given that she was such a seeker of truth, it's probably not surprising that when she went to the University of Breslau, when she was 20 years old, that she very quickly fell in love with philosophy. And in particular, a type of philosophy called phenomenology. And so 2 years later, she actually transferred to the university at Göttingen, and in order to study with Edmund Husserl, who was one of the main leaders of phenomenology. And she studied with him for the next few years. She was also his teaching assistant. And when she was 24 years old, she earned a PhD in philosophy, summa cum laude, with the highest honors. Now, the interesting thing was that you might not think of a university as a place where there's a lot of people of faith. But Edith became friends with many people who were very devout Christians there. And many were actually had been born Jewish and became Christian as adults, including Edmund Husserl himself. And after a while, Edith began thinking that there were so many of these incredibly gifted and talented academics and brilliant intellectuals that she admired so much, and they were people of faith. And so she began to think that maybe there was something to it, that faith, maybe religion and faith in God was something that she should consider. And so her mind became more open to religion. And there were several incidents too that she wrote about that really made an impact on her as well. One was when she visited the widow of a friend of hers who had died in World War I. And when she went to visit his widow, she found her grieving. She was in mourning, and yet at the same time, there was a sense that she was accepting of her suffering, that she was at peace with it. And this really made a powerful impression on Edith. And there was another incident as well that she wrote about, and it was when she visited a friend of hers in Frankfurt, and they went to a cathedral there, And the cathedral was empty when they walked in, but then she saw an older woman come in, enter the cathedral, and she went into the pew and then she knelt in prayer. And Edith had never seen anybody kneel before while they were praying. That's not something that's done in Judaism, and she hadn't seen it in any of the Protestant churches she'd been to either. And seeing someone worship God in this way, the kneeling signified just an incredible, this sense of ultimate surrender to God and such a reverence of God. And this just made a really powerful impact on her, so much so that she described herself as being moved to tears when she saw this woman kneeling in prayer. And so for Edith, though, the real moment of revelation, you might call it, came in the summer of 1921. And at this point, there were summer holidays were going on, and a friend had recommended that she read the autobiography of Saint Teresa of Avila. And so Edith began to read the book, and she was so engrossed with it and so captivated by it, she read the entire book in one night. And at the end of it, she was able to say with absolute certainty, "This is the truth." And from that moment on, she really became a person of faith. And the very next day, she actually went out and she bought a missal, and she bought a copy of the Catholic Catechism and just started to read it. And really very soon, she became a woman of prayer. She was praying regularly. And finally, she decided that becoming a Catholic was her calling. That was what she wanted, and that was what God was calling her to do. And so a year later, when she was 30 years old, she was baptized into the Catholic Church. And she also, very early on, she realized that God was calling her to join the Carmelite order, which was the order of Teresa of Avila. And she felt a really strong calling, but she knew that her mother would really be brokenhearted if she became a nun. And her mother was very upset when Edith became Christian and became a Catholic, and took it very hard. And Edith did not want to make her mother have to suffer anymore. So she decided to put off joining the Carmelites at this stage. And so instead she found a job teaching at a Dominican girls' school, and she stayed there for 8 years. And also during that time she continued to write many works of philosophy, and she also translated Thomas Aquinas into German, which was one of her major works. So after 8 years at the school, she took a position teaching at a Catholic institute in Germany. But unfortunately, in 1933, which was just a year later, she had to resign the position because by that point the Nazis came to power, and they immediately started passing anti-Semitic laws. And with the Nazis, they did not care if you were a Catholic. If you had Jewish ancestry, you were a target, and they would go after you. And so Edith suffered from the anti-Jewish laws. And so she had to resign her position at the institute. And at that point, she made the decision that it was time to enter the Carmelite monastery. And So she went and she made the very difficult journey back to her family, and she revealed to them that she was joining the Carmelites and that she was going to be cloistered and that she wouldn't be able to visit them anymore. And this was really absolutely devastating for her family, and in particular for her mother, who was really suffered so greatly. And there was an incredibly sad and touching moment where she tried her best to comfort her mother, who was mourning her loss. And she went and she put her arms around her mother and tried her best to comfort her. But it didn't. She wasn't able to relieve her mother's suffering. And this was something that caused Edith great sadness, but she also said that she did feel a sense of peace too, because this is where she felt that God was calling her. This was her vocation, to join the Carmelites. And so she was going to follow his will for her. And so in 1933, that was when she entered the Carmelite monastery. So I'm going to stop the video here, and in my next video, which will be coming out in 2 weeks, I'm going to talk about the second part of Edith's life. Before I wrap up for today, I also wanted to pose a question to you. Who is your Catholic role model? As Catholics, I feel it's so important that we have a role model. So if you have a Catholic role model, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear that. Thank you for being here, and have a blessed day.